Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second annual Purple Tie Awards recognizing men in our community who are dedicated to breaking the cycle of domestic violence. Thank you, YWCA Glendale, who in partnership with the City of Glendale Commission on the Status of Women organized this virtual event, and for all of the work they have been doing year after year to raise awareness about domestic violence. A few weeks ago, as the mayor of Glendale and with the support of entire Glendale City Council, we issued a proclamation that recognized the month of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Glendale. The Glendale community is very involved, and it is through the coordination of the City Council, Glendale Police Department, the YWCA, regional partners, and the Commission on the Status of Women that we are able to serve our residents when they encounter such violence. Your presence here today marks your commitment to the elimination of violence from our community. You are here because you believe that it should be safe to go home and that cycle of abuse can be broken. Thank you all for being here today to be part of the solution. I want to take a moment to offer my sincere appreciation to the men being honored here today as part of the second annual Purple Tie Awards. Your work to help end domestic violence in our community is invaluable. I would now like to turn it over to Suzanne Brasilian, Chair of the Glendale Commission on the Status of Women.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Brasilian, and I am the Chair of the City of Glendale's Commission on the Status of Women. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my fellow commissioners on the Commission on the Status of Women and thank them for serving the women and girls of our community. Armina Perian, Elena Samirjian, and Diane Lambalot. The Commission on the Status of Women serves as an advisory board to City Council. We want to thank Council for recognizing October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and applaud Council's commitment to provide education and awareness on this very important issue that affects so many families. We share this proclamation with the YWCA and are pleased to continue our partnership with them. Thank you to the YWCA board and staff for their commitment to helping eliminate violence in our community. The City of Glendale proudly joined the Purple Light Nights campaign and lit City Hall purple this month to bring awareness of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We hope that as people drive by and see this symbolic color at City Hall, on porch lights, and at businesses across Glendale, it will serve as a reminder of those victims who have lost their lives as a result of domestic violence, and a reminder to support those who have survived it, and to provide hope to those still living with the abuse. And I hope that this virtual gathering will signal to those living with the abuse that they are not alone, and that they are people in our community, including the men who are receiving Purple Tie Awards today, who are here to help. I want to take a moment to congratulate the awardees. Thank you all for supporting our commitment to survivors and working with community to break the cycle and end domestic violence. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to now introduce Tara Peterson, CEO of the YWCA Glendale, who will be facilitating today's conversations with our honorees.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Susan, for opening today's event. We are so grateful for your support and partnership in working to end domestic violence. I'd like to also thank Dignity Health Glendale Memorial Hospital, Los Angeles County Board of Supervisor Catherine Barger, and Chief Carl Povolitis, and the Glendale Police Department for sponsoring today's event. And I would like to thank everyone viewing this event for joining us today, including Senator Portantino and Assemblymember Laura Friedman. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this week is a week without violence, where YWCAs across the nation and the globe with World YWCA are hosting events that raise awareness and engage in action to end the broad spectrum of violence against women and girls. We are honored that today's event is part of a 20-year global campaign to end violence against women. I would be remiss to not also acknowledge what our community is currently experiencing and the layered traumas many of us are carrying today. We are in a pandemic, are witnessing an escalation of domestic violence, are navigating an economic downturn, and now we are also experiencing the deep pain of the violence taking place in Armenia. I hope that today's conversations, which will touch on these intersecting issues, will raise more awareness, provide you with inspiration, and be a moment of reprieve for any pain you may be experiencing. Our Purple Tie Awards provides us with the opportunity to shine the light on the men in our community who are working to end domestic violence. And I am so honored to recognize T.C. Kim, Jerome French, Sergeant Ernesto, Sergeant Ernest, can somebody help me with the name? Gaxiola, sorry, I apologize, so I'm sorry. Sergeant Ernest Gaxiola and Father Voskin today. I apologize so deeply. I am live and I can't believe this is happening. Anyway, so I'm also pleased to have Casey Gwinn join us for a special keynote address. Men play a critical role in influencing other men and boys to challenge cultural norms and stop behaving in ways that encourage and actively reinforce violence against women and children. We are not going to end violence against women and children unless we engage men and encourage them to step forward as leaders in this critical work. The statistics are sobering and are only rising as COVID-19 has isolated survivors, removed adults and children from their systems of networks and support, and added financial stressors that can accelerate hopelessness and abuse. We have felt this rise firsthand and witnessed an increase in requests of services through our hotline, increase in food insecurity, and mental health services for women and children. Today's honorees are working to disrupt those statistics. From leading the YWCA Glendale into its 95th year of service and positioning our programs to effectively meet the needs of survivors, to ensuring survivor safety and offender accountability through first response and investigation, to providing comfort and care to those who have experienced both the impact of genocide, war, and gender-based violence. This year's 2020 Purple Tie Award honorees are demonstrating what it means to lead with hope, to respond with hope, and how to instill hope. I recently read a definition of hope that said, hope is a sense of possibility within the uncertainty of a future that does not yet exist, but one that we are making by our actions. I've been thinking about our honorees and our keynote speaker and how they are each leading, responding, and instilling hope through their work to end domestic violence. I am thinking of survivors who come to us, not knowing what their future holds, but knowing that a new life, one full of dignity, respect, and healing is possible. I'm also thinking about the families who have lost members because of domestic violence, and we hold you in our hearts today. What courage, what bravery to have hope in these times. Today, we will be reimagining hope together. I invite you to make a donation in honor of someone you know who has been affected by domestic violence and hopes for a better future. I invite you to make a donation for every child that walks through our doors, scared, confused, and hopes for a better tomorrow. I invite you to make a donation, no matter how big or small, because you hope for a better world. As we move through our conversations, We invite you to join in by sharing your thoughts in the chat and by engaging on social media with the hashtag Purple Tie Awards, Hope for Survivors, YWCA Glendale. So let's get started with our first conversation. To start things off, I would like to welcome two members of YWCA Glendale's Board of Directors, TC Kim and Jerome French, who are both being recognized with the Volunteer Service Advocate Award. TC Kim has over 30 years of experience in the field of victim advocacy. He is a founding member of the Wilshire Community Police Advisory Board. He is a board member of the Glendale Police Foundation. And TC currently serves as president of the Korean American Foundation of Glendale. He has provided support to so many victims of domestic violence throughout his career. And he has been an instrumental board member at the YWCA of Glendale. Jerome French is a certified public accountant and certified valuation analyst who carries over 23 years of experience in his field. He has been a member of the YWCA Glendale Board of Directors for over 10 years. He was the president of the chair of the board from July 2015 to 2017, and the board treasurer from July 17th to July 2019. Jerome was instrumental in helping to support the YWCA Glendale's executive leadership team while they were searching for an executive director as well as a finance director in 2016. Both Jerome and TC were influential in my recruitment and hiring during their board tenure, and I would like to say they did a very good job. And our organization has doubled its operating budget, crafted an ambitious 5-year strategic plan, and laid the foundation for our impact and growth. Thank you both for being a part of this special event. It is so wonderful to have this opportunity to recognize you both and lift up the work you have done to strengthen YWCA Glendale and our domestic violence program. Great. I think we're just waiting for TC to join us. So welcome, Jerome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. And I don't feel worthy of this honor, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And there he is.
There, TC.
Hey, TC, how are you?
Yes.
Good, how are you, Jerome? Thank you.
Thank you guys both so much for being here. And, you know, when I think about the length of time you've all been served on this board and how much you have witnessed at the YWCA Glendale go through good times and bad times and ups and downs. And oftentimes we don't see men who decide to join a board of an organization that's focused on domestic violence. Can you share with us, I'll start with Jerome, one of your motivating factors for joining the YWCA Glendale?
Well, you know, the baseline factor, aside from somebody coming and saying, hey, you know, we would really love to have you involved, was actually the fact that that my sister went through a situation, and she's kindly said it was okay to discuss this, where she encountered domestic violence. Now, thankfully, she didn't buy into the cycle of recurrence that goes along with that so often. But I wasn't in a situation where I could reach her because she was in another state. But that's always weighed very heavily on me. And it's something that between that and kind of my mother's sort of general upbringing of me to respect women has always been very, very important. And so that's really kind of what got me to say, yes, this is something that I want to be involved in. And boy, I had no idea that it would take the path that it did, but I am certainly grateful that it did. So,
thank you, TC, and thank you for sharing your sister's story. TC, how about you? I mean, you've had so many years of working in domestic violence field, from working in a shelter to providing advocacy and support and training police officers and advocates. What was your motivating factor for joining the YWCA Glendale?
It goes back to about 35 years ago when I was at UCLA. I followed my friend to just volunteer at a place called Every Woman's Shelter that was supported by National Council of Jewish Women at a shelter, just to play with children who experience abuse. And then I went through a training, and I was shocked to learn that so many women and children were being abused. And around those times, I was actually practicing Taekwondo, which is martial arts. So I knew firsthand how painful it is when you get hit or strike or kicked or punched. And I was even surprised to learn that some of the pregnant women were being beaten up by their husbands. And it was so unbelievable for me at that time to learn those facts. And I was trained by his founder named Nilda Rimonti, who was very innovative a leader who inspired me and turned me into, brainwashed me practically into an advocate. Ever since then, I worked in that shelter for 7 years. And then I went to city attorney's office to work for victims program for another 9 years. Ended up in nonprofit sector, serving for victim advocacy and victims' rights work for over 30 years. And about 6 years ago, at a meeting I had with Paula Devine, who's a good friend from Glendale City Council, she introduced me to Glendale YWCA and told me that, TC, you've been living here over 20 years. Why don't you involve this organization? Only one of its kind in this Tri-City area that helps out domestic violence victims. Please join us. And I had to join in and do what I can to help out as an advocate for victims.
Thank you so much, TC. It's one of those things, once an advocate, always an advocate, right? So
Correct.
It's hard to leave this work once you start. And so, as you all prepare for your departure, can you just share one highlight from your time serving as a board member? We'll start with Jerome.
Interestingly enough, that highlight came a year after I was on the board and at a point where I was being asked to take on the presidency. And I had yet had the opportunity to do a walkthrough of our shelter. And that really kind of moving through there, seeing everything that was going on that we were doing to help on a very visual level, as opposed to, listening to the various programs and things that we did, but actually seeing that had a huge impact on me and kind of what I wanted to see achieved in the organization. And so, yeah, that really was it for me.
Great. Thank you, Jerome, for sharing that. TC.
Actually, it happened about a year ago for our first Purple Tie Award ceremony last year. When I was asked to introduce some of the honorees from Glendale Police Department, I was given a chance to speak in front of people. This candlelight visual event is such heart-touching, heartwarming event. And it was a chance for me to speak up. And I think I remember saying that men should not be just part of the problem in domestic violence, but they should be part of the solution. Everybody was so pleased to hear that. That was the highlight of my being voluntary for the Glendale YWCA.
Thank you so much for that. Definitely, I appreciate you sharing those highlights. And I think that, having the opportunity to kind of look inside and see the work that we do inside can definitely be life-changing. And I'm so happy that you all were able to provide your leadership. And so now, as you prepare to say goodbye to us, as you are both finishing your last term with the YWCA Glendale, what is one hope you have for the future of the YWCA Glendale and the work that we're doing to end domestic violence? TC,
you want to go ahead?
Well, I've worked in both emergency shelter, transitional shelter, and permanent shelter for domestic violence survivors. And I understand that currently Glendale YWCA only does emergency services. I hope someday that you can provide more comprehensive service by bringing in more another building, perhaps for transitional housing care and also permanent housing care to provide longer term service to help out the domestic violence survivors.
Yes, thank you so much, TC. And Jerome.
I hope that we see more men stepping forward and speaking the truth. And the truth is that you can't really be a strong man without strong women. And I think that gets lost. I think that has historically gotten lost. And there might be some sort of fear, and I don't understand it, but having a strong woman and relationship with strong women makes you a stronger man, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Not the other way around. Weakness doesn't support anybody. And so having strong women and just being able to alleviate all of the restraints that come along with violence, and it's not just physical violence as you guys know, but financial violence and just, I'm not going to get into that, but strong women equal strong men, and men are going to be part of that solution by helping and promoting that. And that's what I want to see.
Absolutely. Well, I've had the honor and privilege to work under both of your leaderships, and it's been truly amazing. And I am so honored to be able to present the Purple Tie Award to you all. I can't think of anybody more deserving, doing the work behind the scenes, and really helping us be the organization that we are today. We could not have done it without you. So thank you so very much both for everything you've done. And we are so honored to recognize your service today and every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerome and TC. Shifting gears now, I would like to introduce you to a very special guest, esteemed colleague in the field of domestic violence, and someone I have known my entire 20-year career. Casey Gwinn. Casey has been a trailblazer in our work to create effective models for wraparound and centralized services to support survivors' pursuits of justice and healing. Casey will be providing us what I know will be a very powerful and inspiring keynote speech on Reimagining Hope. Casey serves as the president of the Alliance for Hope International and has been recognized by the American Lawyer magazine as one of the top 45 public lawyers in America. Casey served for 8 years as the elected city attorney of San Diego from 1996 to 2004. His transformative work as a prosecutor changed the face of domestic violence prosecution in the United States. He is the visionary behind the Family Justice Center movement, the founder of Camp Hope America for children impacted by domestic violence, and one of the leading thinkers in the country on the power of hope in the lives of adult and child trauma survivors, as well as helping professionals. He has authored and co-authored 10 books since 2006, and his newest book entitled Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. It is a roadmap to a life well lived and points the way toward the power of hope in the lives of all those who have experienced hardship and adversity. Welcome, Casey. It's so good to see you.
Tara, it's great to see you too.
It's been a long time.
Well, it's a great honor to be here with you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored to support your leadership at the YWCA Glendale and honored to share today.
Thank you. So before you start, I know we're live, I'm just going to say this, but I remember when I was first appointed, my first executive director job, when I was appointed in 2009 to the California Partnership Domestic Violence, you flew all the way from San Diego to Sacramento to be a part of my welcoming ceremony and provided remarks. And I will never forget those remarks. They mean so much to me, and thank you.
Well, blessings on you. Your pain has become power, and I love the work you're doing at YWCA Glendale.
Thank you. All right, I'll let Casey take it away.
Well, thank you. It's such an honor to be with you all. I'm actually going to share my screen here. We'll see how that goes, and be able to share hopefully a little bit about the science of hope as we talk today. So if somebody can just let me know, can you see that screen? Is it up there for you? I'm going to hope that you can see the screen that should have a Reimagining Hope slide on it. I'm not able to see that while I have my screen shared. But it's an honor for me to be able to be with you all today and be able to share a little bit about the whole theme of today, reimagining hope and instilling hope. I have talked a lot about hope over the 35 years I've been in this work. I grew up in a home impacted by child abuse and domestic violence for generations that I did not come to grips with as a child. I too battled for that robbery of hope in my life as a child. Though I will say that I also grew up with privilege. I grew up certainly with white male privilege. So I didn't experience some of the consequences that boys and men of color experience having been impacted by child abuse and domestic violence. But early on in my career, I would say, we've got to give hope. We've got to give more hope to people. We're in the hope business, but I didn't understand it. And it wasn't until many years ago, I was reading an article about Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa said, when asked what the calling is of humanity, we must give hope, always hope. And that phrase stuck with me, her quote stuck with me. And then in 2012, almost 25 years or more into this work, I found out that you can measure hope, that there is a science around hope, that it had been researched in the University of Kansas in the 1990s, and then had become this amazing movement across the United States. And so I met the leading hope researcher in 2012, Dr. Chan Hellman, who runs the Hope Research Center at the University of Oklahoma. And Dr. Chan Hellman basically said to me, I hear you run an organization called Alliance for Hope. I hear you run a camp for children impacted by domestic violence called Camp Hope. So here's my question. Do you increase hope in the lives of the people you work with? And I said, I hope so. And he said, well, you shouldn't be hoping so. You should be able to measure it. And I said, you can't measure hope. Hope is like, positive thinking. It's optimism. It's kind of wishing for a better future. And he said, no, hope is a science, and I can measure it in human beings. And if you're doing good work with survivors of violence and abuse, you can measure hope. And so sure enough, we started measuring it, first in our Camp Hope program, then in family justice centers across California, and then across the country. And here's what I want to share today, because the YWCA Glendale is in the hope business. And the reason you all should support the YWCA is because they're actually giving hope to adult and child survivors. They're leaning in to the lives of people who were born with hope, because that's the fundamental principle of the research, is that human beings are hope-centered. We have the ability to look out into the future, imagine who we want to be or what we want to do, and then figure out the pathways to get there. It's the essence of being human. Animals in general are not hope-centered creatures. Animals are creatures of instinct. And most animals think about things from an instinctual standpoint, what to do, where to go, how to survive. Human beings alone have the ability to look out into the future and imagine who they want to be and what they want to do. But the reason we're all in this business that we're in today, the reason we're honoring these amazing men who have leaned into supporting the YWCA Glendale and addressing this issue of gender-based violence in Los Angeles and in the United States, is because children get robbed of hope. Adults get robbed of hope. We all get robbed of hope. We're born with it, and yet then along comes direct trauma, vicarious trauma, which happens to staff at the YWCA Glendale, which happens to police officers, which happens to prosecutors, which happens to advocates. Vicarious trauma, the trauma of others, gets visited upon us and robs us of that ability to look forward in our life and figure out who we want to be and what we want to do. It could be illness. It could be the loss of a relationship, the loss of a child. Lots of adversity in life robs us of hope. And children always get robbed first. Children always get robbed first. And so for us, as we talk today, I want to challenge you to think about the business we're in, because we're really in the business of giving hope. And as Brene Brown said in another context a number of years ago, you cannot give what you do not have. So we have to be in the business not only of helping others find hope, but making sure we have it in our own lives. Whatever we're doing, whatever we do for a living, whatever we do in this work, whether we're simply donors or we're staff members or we're allied agencies, you cannot give what you do not have. So in 2012, when I met Dr. Chan Hellman, he said, there's actually a scientific definition of hope, Casey. And I said, what's that? And he said, hope is the belief that your future can be brighter than your past and that you play a role in making it happen. That was something I did not know. And he said, and we can measure that in human beings. And I said, there's research out there on hope. And he said, enormous research. In fact, as we started working on a book together in 2017, our literature review found 2,000 studies looking at the science of hope. And what was so stunning about it was that in every single study, if hope went up in somebody's life, so did well-being. And if other things went up, resiliency or other kind of factors, it didn't necessarily increase well-being in people's lives. Hope was the single best predictor of trauma recovery, the single best predictor of well-being. And so I realized Mother Teresa was right a long time ago when she said, we must give hope, always hope. So in 2018, Chan and I were honored to write a book that Tara mentioned called Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. And it changed my life completely. Having grown up in a home with violence and abuse, having to start thinking about how I was robbed of hope as a child, how that kind of low-grade fever that I suffered from things that had happened in my home, where I wanted my family to be a certain way, but I couldn't change what my family was. I couldn't change who my bipolar father was. I realized we had to tell this story. And amazingly enough, one of the stories in Hope Rising is the amazing relationship that I had with a Black leader in San Diego, a sexual assault survivor, Ashley Walker, who was the founder of Battered Women's Services at the YWCA in San Diego. In fact, I went on to succeed her as the first male CEO of the YWCA of San Diego County many years later. And Ashley, who was a leader in the African-American community, invested in me, a white guy who knew virtually nothing about trauma and violence and how to help survivors. And that relationship helped increase hope in my own life. And we're still dear friends to this very day. And as I started learning about the science from Chan, he said, hey, Casey, it's all about goal setting and it's all about pathways thinking. So you got to have goals that are yours personally, that you're motivated to pursue, and you've got to have the ability to think about the steps you need to take to your goals. And he said there's even a continuum in the research. Hope is that ability to set goals, imagine who you want to be, what you want to do, know how to get there. And then when people can't get to their goals in life, anger, rage, and frustration is a normal human emotion. And when they keep striving for their goals but can't get there, people do get angry and frustrated. And then when they start to lose their motivation to get to goals, they start to slide down that continuum to despair and eventually get to the opposite of hope, which is really not hopelessness. The opposite of hope is apathy. When a survivor of domestic violence says, I can never get away from him. There's nothing I can ever do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop him. I don't know how to go forward in life. I don't know what to do. Apathy, the ultimate robbery of hope. It's when higher rates of suicidal ideation happen in survivors of domestic violence. And that same continuum happens in the lives of offenders and perpetrators. Growing up, robbed of hope, often very young, who grow up with that anger, that ultimately produces this choice to hurt others in their lives. And when you slide down that continuum as a rage-filled, misogynistic man, you become incredibly scary. In fact, with the mass shooters in this country, we've tied it to the science of hope. With cop killers in this country, we've tied it to the science of hope. So the more abusers lose hope in their life, the more they grasp at things to try to have control, like control another human being. The most dangerous men on the planet strangle women in domestic violence relationships. They go after the neck of a human being. Scary, dangerous men who, by the way, we have recently found are also the majority of those who kill police officers in America. Men who strangle women in domestic violence. So you can see how this continuum works. People being robbed of hope in their lives. Adults, children, perpetrators of violence, or even survivors or victims of domestic violence. And when I saw this continuum, I said, so Chan, we've got to be in the business in our organizations of getting people to move from apathy back to despair and from despair back to rage. And he said, no, there's another continuum, Casey, and it's called the Nurturing Continuum. How you nurture hope back into into people's lives. And the reason the YWCA is so stunningly successful in Glendale is because the staff of the YWCA do this. This is what you do as an advocate, as a case manager, as somebody working with someone in crisis, robbed of hope in their life. Okay, let's start setting some small goals, little goals that you care about, that you can accomplish in the next hour, in the next 2 hours, in the next week, in the next month. And little goals, hope begets hope. And slowly you nurture your way back. And when you get to the point of being able to think, how can I get there? What are the steps I need to take? You're starting to head forward. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Even when I ran the shelter, I'd say to women in the shelter, let's take a walk today. And some women were too dark to even take a walk outside, too scared to take a walk outside. I said, I'll keep you safe. We'll just walk around the block. We'll get fresh air. We'll feel the breeze. Imagine what it'll feel like. The sun on our face, we'll laugh together, we'll get some exercise, we'll have a great special time together. I was creating a future memory of success before it even happened. Imagination is the pathway to hope that we're trying to help reinstill in people who suffered trauma, violence, and abuse in their lives. And so as I share with you today about this notion of reimagining hope, I want to challenge you to begin to think about what this means. Tara talked about it, facing a pandemic, facing social unrest, dealing with racial awareness and racial justice issues in Glendale as in every other community in America, and being honest about societal racism and structural racism and what we need to do to address it, particularly in those intersections that Tara talked about, the intersectionality of so many issues we're dealing with in this country right now. And at the end of the day, my challenge to you all, and I think the celebration of the men getting these Purple Tie Awards, is they've been kind-hearted men who have stayed hope-centered. They've stayed focused on what they can do, what goals they can set to make change in the community, to support the YWCA, to support survivors. That's our calling, kind-heartedness and hope-centeredness. So I want to share a little story as I wrap up my brief remarks. We run, as Tara mentioned, the largest camp in the United States for children impacted by domestic violence. It's called Camp Hope America. And we started it in 2003 as part of the San Diego Family Justice Center. This last year, we were in 25 different states, and we'll continue to expand. We do a lot of work with kids in California. I'm going to be talking to Tara about the opportunity to maybe do this work with the YWCA in the months or years to come as well. But we take kids who have been robbed of hope in so many ways in their life. They get to go to camp in the summertime, and then they go through monthly activities, mentoring activities, and we track their hope scores. We literally measure their hope scores in life. And when hope goes up, good things happen in the lives of even children impacted by trauma. Gallup just recently announced that a 2-point increase in a child's hope score actually is the difference of a letter grade in school. So if you can increase hope in a child's life by 2 points and sustain it, that's a letter grade in school. If you can increase it by 4 points, you can take a C student to an A student. That's how significant hope, the ability to set goals and pursue pathways in your life, becomes in predicting trauma recovery and well-being. But we were running a camp a number of years ago up on the central coast of California. A young woman was attending camp. She was then a sophomore in high school, aspiring to be a counselor at Camp Hope. And one of our truth statements that the kids would chant and memorize each night at the campfire was, "I have a hope story." And her name is Janelle. And Janelle, I asked Janelle, because we have these truth statements every day at camp, Janelle, will you write a poster that we can have in the dining room at camp so the kids can be reminded of the statements? And she said, I'll do the statement, "I have a hope story." And so she did. She's a very gifted artist, and she drew that. And then down on the box, on that card, that poster that she drew, you can see in the corner was a book that says Hope, written by me. That's Janelle who drew that. And when I saw it, I said, Janelle, I'm fascinated. You wrote that, you drew that picture. And she said, well, we're all writing our hope story every day, Casey. The choices we make, what we believe in, who we stand by, who we decide to help. We're all writing our hope story every day, and nobody else gets to really write my hope story but me. Janelle has a high what's called an adverse childhood experiences score, long history of violence and abuse, major challenges generationally in her family, and yet she could understand this. Janelle, by the way, went on to become a counselor at Camp Hope, California. There she is with her kids at a campfire on the Central Coast of California 2 years ago, and just got a full ride to Cleveland State University. She wants to become a nurse. But I will never forget her statement, Casey, we're all writing our own hope story every day. So if Janelle Sellis can do it, so can everybody else on this call. That's what the YWCA is doing, in essence, is writing hope stories and helping people write their own hope stories. Because sometimes when people are robbed of hope, we have to be the ones to help lend it to them or give it to them in the process. So I'm going to stop there, except to say, Tara and the YWCA team, thank you. And for those of you that are supporting the Y, lean in. I'm going to make my own donation today, and I hope you all will too, because the YWCA is helping to restore hope in the lives of human beings. And congratulations to the honorees in the Purple Tie Awards. You all are truly hope givers in the work that you have done to support the Y. So blessings on all of you, Tara. Thanks for letting me share today.
Thank you so much, Casey. Truly appreciate your remarks. And wow, just the boost that we all needed. I know that I need it today. And thank you for, uplifting and recognizing those who are on the front line. And I just want to just recognize our team that I know are watching virtually and let them know that they give me hope every day. So thank you guys for all the work that you do. Okay. That was awesome. Okay, so I have to get myself together because I have two more conversations to go through. And I want to welcome, I would like to now introduce our next honoree, Sergeant Ernesto Gaxiola. I did it right. Of the Glendale Police Department. We are honored to recognize him with our Law Enforcement Advocate Award. Sergeant Gax, as we like to call him, began his law enforcement career with the Santa Cruz Police Department, where he worked for 3 years prior to moving to the Glendale Police Department. He is currently the supervisor of the Glendale Police Department Assault Unit, which investigates all domestic violence and sexual assault cases in the city of Glendale. Prior to his role, he was a detective in the unit for 6 years, where he worked hundreds of domestic violence cases, as well as some high-profile investigations. Sergeant Gax has trained new officers on the nuances of domestic violence investigations, sharing his knowledge on the complexity of domestic violence that he learned as a detective. On the national level, he has presented a class on domestic violence to the national audience at an Internet and Crimes Against Children conference in Atlanta. Sergeant Gax continues to share his knowledge and investigations with the 5 detectives he supervises. He is also a U visa administrator and works with victims applying for immigration relief as they cooperate in the judicial process of pursuing justice. On top of all these roles and responsibility, he is also a member of our sponsor, Dignity Health Glendale Memorial's Hospital Human Trafficking Task Force. Welcome, Ernesto. Thank you for your incredible service to survivors of violence. We are honored to partner closely with you and the police department and work to support survivors as they seek justice. So welcome. So glad to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for that intro. You did some investigative work as well, because I didn't tell you about any of that stuff, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, I can't take all the credit, but we have some great people working behind the scenes here. So, as we are, coming off this really amazing keynote speaker, and we're talking about supporting survivors and in our community, law enforcement has always played a key part in responding to domestic violence and helping ensuring their safety. And that's why we're honoring you today, because we do see that as a critical part of ending domestic violence, is making sure that we have people like you in the Glendale Police Department that are able to respond to domestic violence victims in compassionate and caring ways. So before we get started, I wanted to just tell us a little bit about your role and the role of the domestic violence unit for the Glendale Police Department.
Okay, so my unit essentially investigates a multitude of crimes. And if I was going to describe investigations, you have property crimes and persons crimes. So my unit deals with, obviously, persons crimes. So when it comes to domestic violence, and I want to give you, Ms. Peterson, as well as the YWCA, as well as the commission. The only reason we're successful is because the support and assistance we get from organizations like the YWCA and the commission. So when it comes to persons crimes, my unit, long story short, we investigate crimes that are emotional based. Domestic violence has an emotional aspect to it where you see things that are unexpected. You deal with circumstances that you are not expecting. And my unit has a detective cadre that is resilient, they're relentless, they have fortitude. And our job is to ensure that when everything is said and done, it is safer and better than how we encountered it. I hope that is a good summary of what the assaults unit from the Glendale Police Department does.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, one of the things, question that keeps coming up around, the increase in domestic violence during COVID. And I know that we're seeing it on our end of people calling that are not necessarily facing any physical abuse. So it's not something you can call the police for, right? We're hearing a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of feeling of not feeling safe, and mental abuse and financial abuse. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out in the field in regards to domestic violence during this pandemic.
If there's one thing, I will say this now, I will put my name on it, that I think when this is said and done, whenever this is said and done, this lockdown, this pandemic, unfortunately, there's going to be abundance of domestic violence cases that my unit will investigate. And the reason I say that is these are truly unusual times where if you wanted to get out of a horrible situation, you can't. I don't know where you could go. I don't know where you could stay. And on top of that, you have other circumstances such as your job situation is questionable. You have children in school. How do you uproot a family? So in these times, I presume a lot of our cases are going to be instances that are what we would call cold reports. It's not necessarily something that happened recently. And if there's one thing I could say in terms of investigations, we are already handling and investigating. Sometimes our best resources for evidence, and I say resources just in terms of us being able to convey what occurred, it's going to be the resiliency, the actions, and I'm going to say this word again, the fortitude of the victims involved in these incidences, whether it's them documenting their injuries, whether it's them reaching out to organizations like the YWCA, whether it's them talking to family members or friends and saying what happened. And even though they don't necessarily want police involvement, if there's one thing I said earlier, I'm like, hey, if we get involved or whatever the situation is as long as it's better, whether it's the YWCA assisting them along their way where they want no law enforcement involvement, I consider that a win. And if it's us referring somebody to the YWCA where they don't necessarily want police involvement, I will say this, sometimes there's no option. If once we're there, the police, the judicial system will get involved. But if we can provide an outlet where if it's not necessarily something criminal, something the police need to get involved in, as long as there's organizations like the YWCA, the end result will be better. And I am good with that.
That's awesome. That's a great way to look at it. And knowing that if there are any survivors out there that may be struggling, knowing that, you may not be ready to make a phone call today, but there are things you can do right now so when you are ready to make that phone call. So the documentation, talking to friends and family, calling the YWCA Glendale's hotline, those are things that you can do if you are in a situation that you don't feel like you're ready to leave. And I think that's one of the important things about the YWCA Glendale that we want people always to know is that you don't necessarily have to be out of the relationship to get the support and services from us. And we want to do everything possible so that the police department, it doesn't escalate to physical violence and we don't have to call the Glendale Police Department. But we know that's not always the case. And we know that these situations can be very dangerous, very lethal. Can you talk about a little bit about any kind of situation or a story that you can maybe share with us of a situation where you had to really ensure the safety of somebody by either partnering with the YWCA Glendale or working with other organizations to ensure the safety of a survivor that was impacted by domestic violence?
No, absolutely. If there's one thing I would like to say right now is we actually have pamphlets, and it's for special victims and people involved in domestic violence situations. They are considered special victims, whether it's the actual victim involved, whether it's the children involved, if they live with a parent, and at the top of the list in terms of who to contact for resources is the YWCA. But in regards in recent instances, if I could be blunt, we had probably one of the gnarliest domestic violence investigations that just occurred literally yesterday, where I will presume the person involved will either reach out to YWCA or they are going to need some type of support services to assist them with what occurred yesterday. And it's these instances, and I did a presentation a couple of days ago for a couple of members from the Commission of the Status of Women where I am not a stats person. I don't understand math. I don't understand stats, but I do understand this, that since March, when I believe this lockdown started and this pandemic started, the majority of the investigations my unit is handling now has to be domestic violence related. And this instance that happened yesterday, and I'm sorry I cannot divulge more details, this is where organizations such as the YWCA and all the other entities involved, this is where the Glendale Police Department is truly successful because there is a partnership and we are limited in the resources we can offer. But this case, just when I thought I had seen it all, I haven't. And that's how I get wiser. And for me, at least, I'm never satisfied with how I do things. If I'm not getting better, I'm being stagnant. And if I'm being stagnant, that's not good enough. And cases like this, I assure you, Ms. Peterson, you and I will be in contact. If it's not this week, it'll be next week. But what I say, and you mentioned earlier with, there are victims right now that it is just not documented. And when it does come forward, the only way to be successful with this is going to be a collaboration with entities such as yourself. And I think next year, if things get back to normal, I will be able to express and share where we won and where we can get better.
Awesome.
You know, and
I'm so
sorry
grateful.
I can't give you more, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I know that that's a hard question, but I think it's important for people to know, the community to know that you guys are out there, you're responding, you're on the front lines, just as our staff is. And we just truly appreciate the partnership. I appreciate everything that you do. We are honored to recognize you as our law enforcement advocate. And we will definitely continue to be in conversation. And I appreciate the Glendale Police Department. Thank you, the chief, for sponsoring this event as well. Just a heartfelt thank you to you and all the work that you do, as well as the rest of your team, to respond to victims of domestic violence in our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Truly, thank you.
We are truly a lucky community because, you know, because we're such a small community, we're able to really have a direct relationship with the Police Department. And that definitely makes a difference when we're working with victims of domestic violence. I would like to now move into our final conversation today with a beloved leader in our community and someone who I consider a dear friend, Father Voskin. I am privileged to present the Community Partner Service Award to Father Voskin at a time when our community is calling out for comfort, guidance, and compassion. Father Voskin has been a part of our Domestic Violence Awareness Month events predating me, and he is always available anytime that I need him, and I could not think of anybody better to honor with this award for all of his work that he is doing to address domestic violence in the Armenian community and the broader community, all the work that he is doing to talk about genocide and the current situation that's happening and impacting his community. He has also traveled to Rwanda to work with those ravaged by genocide. Coupled with his personal experience growing up with genocide survivors, he founded the In His Shoes movement, which challenges victims of horrific tragedies to move forward by extending assistance to others, by walking in their shoes. Father Voskin, thank you for being here. Your voice is so needed during this time when we search for hope during a war against Armenia. This violence has been at the forefront of our community's hearts and minds, and we stand in solidarity with our Armenian brothers and sisters here in Glendale and Artsakh. I want to open our conversation by really creating a space for you to just describe with the people that are here today about what is happening right now.
First of all, thank you, Tara, and I appreciate this recognition, and it also goes to the wonderful people who've been behind me through our church. What's happening today in Artsakh is something that is an ongoing struggle. Today, unfortunately, what we hear on April 24th about genocide, that genocide is in the plans. And what happened in 1915 when the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Turks tried to systematically annihilate the Armenians, today they would like to finish it off. And that's just what's the sad part, and the reality of it is that they are overtly claiming this, and the world, like in 1915, the world today is consumed with so much other things. But I don't want to say that it's really a world that's not looking, because the world's always consumed with other stuff. Absolutely. And I do remember having gone to Rwanda and working with them. The Rwandan genocide happened during the time of O.J. Simpson's trial, when the world was consumed with a trial, yes, domestic violence again, but genocide, of course, is the big picture of domestic violence. So I appreciate you giving me this time to share with the listeners, the watchers, about what's happening in Artsakh.
Absolutely. We also want our community, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, genocide is the bigger issue, right? But with genocide and with war and with violence, we see increase of violence against women with genocides and war, right? And if we're really talking about ending gender-based violence, that means let's not have genocide happen, let's not have war happen, and then we won't see gender-based violence, right? There's this connection. And can you kind of share with us a little bit more about the intersection and gender-based violence, and how that also contributes to the trauma that Armenian diaspora is facing, and anybody else?
It's all the same picture about violence, about rape. And I use that word intentionally because when you come down to what are our moral absolutes, I think we make cases even for killing, when defense of loved ones, defense of your life. We have a case for killing. We have cases for lying, to stop a worse evil. But when it comes to rape, if you were forced to think about one absolute, a moral evil, rape is the one that you cannot get around. You can't say, well, rape is okay in these cases. Mm-hmm. Rape in the case of women, rape in the case of people is now amplified in the case of genocide. And it becomes amplified to the point that it turns beyond that person, domestic, namely the house, but to the community, amplified to international proportions. And what happens at that point is it transcends the space, like the house, the domestic, and it goes to the nation, and therefore transcends time. And so what you have today, 100 years after a genocide in Armenia, you have people who march and proclaim because we want validation. It's the same story. It's the woman who is raped, who is abused. She wants validation first and foremost, that yes, this did happen. I'm not lying about it. I'm not making up this story. You don't need to listen to the guy who perpetrated this on me. And this is all the Armenians are saying. It's like, hey, check it out. We have absolutely no reason to be sitting in Artsakh and exert ourselves on anyone else. It's just we're sitting ducks, and it's the violence, it's the rape, it's the rape of a people that becomes genocide. And that's where I think the intersection is. It's the same story except amplified. And so to me, my work within the local community has always been there because of what my ancestors have gone through, namely my grandparents who are genocide survivors.
Absolutely. I remember last year you shared a story with us about a woman who was a victim of domestic violence that was an Armenian woman, and how she was looking for help in her community, and it was difficult for her to find that help, but she eventually did find that help. And I know that sometimes when we talk about domestic violence, it impacts every culture is impacted. It's not one culture or one ethnicity, one race or anything like that. That can be impacted by domestic violence. But what we know when we have worked really hard at our organization to make sure we have a space for Armenian victims of domestic violence, making sure that we have staff that speak the language. And I think that's critical, important to doing the work, is that you have people that reflect the community that you're serving. And during this time, it's been really challenging for them because they are here getting support groups, living in our shelter, dealing with domestic violence, but also dealing with the pain and the grief about what is happening and the violence that's happening to their family in Armenia. What can you say to those women who are just trying to figure out how to survive the next day, but there's this massive other conflict that's going on?
Yeah, first, let me just say what the Y does over there is beyond belief, and your attention specifically to the community. Outside of Armenia, you're sitting in one of the largest concentration of Armenians in the diaspora. And so it's a unique position that the Y has. And I've watched, as you said, I've been involved with it for years, but what you brought to the Y, the ability to take in, to give a community a shelter, is something that we need to focus in on the conversation about war as well. We need a place to be accepted. In other words, Armenia is such a small little place. I mean, there's more people on LA freeways on an average day than there are Armenians in the whole world. Most people would be hard pressed to find Armenia on a map, let alone a place called Artsakh. And that's exactly the same story of a woman who is being abused. Nobody cares. Nobody really wants to get involved. It's easier to turn your head. And so what I really have to say to people is don't give up. It's the hope that you've been talking about. So these women, the workers who are concentrating, and we all are, we're day and night, we're thinking about what's going on in Artsakh. The glimmer is that little hope. And if we didn't have that hope, as we heard a few minutes ago, from the keynote, from everywhere, it comes down to that hope. So I think you just made this beautiful choice in focusing in on hope this year, because I think that's the message we all need to hear. And it's a message that we talk to everyone about, is just have hope. It's going to get better. It has to. Nothing gets worse than this. It doesn't.
So with that being said, I have two last questions. How can non-Armenians best support the Armenian community right now?
Non-Armenians can support it by forgetting about that descriptor. We all have to, we need a world where we start understanding each other's pain. And I think you have it on your Facebook page. You're an Armenian today. Yes, you've always been an Armenian. We need to get beyond these labels on everybody. I'm an Armenian by ancestry. I'm an American here. Absolutely. And being an American, my rights are being abused. We have to understand that our only hope in this world is the dream that we have. The dream that we are all brothers and sisters. That's the hope. If we're going to have a hope for tomorrow, it's to get rid of the things. Sure, pride is important. You have your culture, you bring it, but the pride becomes an ugly thing when that pride says, hey, I'm better than you are. And that's what we're seeing. So I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of the descriptors and say that we're all Armenian, we're all American, we're all Black, we're all Mexican. In other words, we're all people. We got a belly button. And if you don't have a belly button, that's a problem. It's from another spaceship or something. But yeah, I think that's the thing that I would tell everybody. Because what we need really mostly is, yes, we need money, we need supplies, and people have been so generous, but we really need people to pray. And by praying, it doesn't mean you go down on your knees. It doesn't mean you connect to any specific thing, except to understand that if there is a higher force, a God, it's within you. And you have that power. You have that ability. It's the same thing what we tell domestic violence victims. It's the same thing we tell our people. It's like we have to allow that God to shine, that energy that's inside of you, whatever you want to call it. And so that's what I ask from everybody, is to pray for Armenia, pray for Artsakh. And if you do, then automatically you start letting loose of the money. You automatically start letting loose of everything else that you need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I really appreciated that that remark. We're just getting rid of those descriptors, and we are all Armenian today and tomorrow. We are all American. We are all Black. We are all Latinx. We are all Asian. We are all humans, and I think that's a beautiful message. It inspires me as I move forward in the work that we're doing in the community. But the last question I have to ask you is, just tell me what gives you hope for a better tomorrow.
It's hard. It's hard. Sometimes it's really difficult. And that I think we need to be honest. There is no magic. But what gives me hope is the little stories, to see you and what you're doing at the Y, to see others who you should see coming down to the diocese. Tomorrow we're having a 3-day fasting. Tomorrow night we're having a vigil till midnight. When you see the number of people who are coming out, bringing their children, they're filling up boxes with materials that we're sending, the donations. It gives me hope that, yeah, whatever they tell you outside, there is the good that we need to focus in on. I'll leave you with a story that I think maybe it has to do with domestic violence. A few years ago, a very famous hip hop artist was sentenced by the judge to community service. And he came and he worked at our church for community service. And I said, what can you do for me? I don't want you just sweeping up and everything. And he said, I can't sing because that's my voice. He says, but I could draw. And so I gave him a canvas and some paint, and he drew this beautiful painting, which just is just a lot of noise in it. It's this giant ugly monster and everything. And at the bottom, there's this little red dot. And I asked him, I said, what is that red dot? And he says, even monsters have hearts. And it just brought home the thing that, yes, this guy has messed up his family. He's trying to but there is a heart inside of there. And it's up to us to find that heart. Really, it's difficult. It's difficult. I think Dr. King said it so beautifully. I'm glad Jesus said, love your enemies and not like them, because it's hard for me to like somebody who's hurting me. But that love is what has to be a little bit higher. And I think that's what keeps me going, is trying to find that love inside of everybody.
Thank you so much, Father Voskin. Your inspirational words of comfort and hope. We are so honored and so grateful for everything you do. And thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We hope that everybody out there was able to learn more about the work that is being done to end gender-based violence in our community and throughout this entire country and world. It was truly an amazing program. I feel completely honored and privileged to be a part of this program. I want to thank Heather Masterson, who's doing all this work behind the scenes, and Celeste Mesa for doing work behind the scenes as well. We encourage you all to stay connected. Thank you for your donations. We see them there. We are $420 away from our goal. I want people to know that every $140 donates is we're able to provide an additional bed night to women and children in our shelter. Our funding allows us to pay for 45 nights. On average, women and children are staying up to 62 nights in our shelter. So every $140 helps us provide those additional nights. So thank you for your donations. If you need more information, you can visit our website. Thank you again to the City of Glendale and the Commission on Status of Women, to all of our sponsors who were here today, that were here supporting us and watching us virtually, and to all of you for becoming a part of our beloved community, a community that holds the possibility of hope. Be safe, be well, and we hope to see you all soon.